Hey, folks, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today we have Jeff York on from the Establishing Shot. We haven't had Jeff on in a while. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing okay. It's good to see you, Mike, and glad to be here with you.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on. And today, for our topic, we chose movies that are our guilty pleasures, films that, when we watch them, we know we shouldn't like them, but yet we still do. And the first movie we're starting with today is I'm being a selfish jerk, is my choice. It's Jackass, because here's a film that I think when it came out, people thought, oh God, this is going to be the downfall of civilization. People are just going to be like slamming each other in the shopping carts. And in a way, Jackass did kind of give way to the internet that we have today, with like short, crazy YouTube videos. And it also gave birth to Borat. So if you didn't have Jackass, you probably wouldn't have Borat, because that was sort of like the beginning of the whole like prank slash gross out sort of humor sort of thing. And Jackass is great because it's a movie where you can watch. It's a movie that actually defines why you would go to a theater to see a film. I remember when I saw the first movie, um, it was playing in some theater really far away from me. I came in about like 20 minutes late, like me and a few friends, and it was hilarious. Like we were I never seen a theater laugh that hard ever at that time. And this was like what, 2002? Oh my god. Yeah, and that was like during the scene when Bam lights up the fireworks and wakes his dad up with that. And this movie's something where you could just walk in at any point. There is no plot, there is no story. This isn't really even a documentary or a movie. It's just like a series of sketches. And those sketches are disgusting, and you shouldn't laugh. Like, why, as a grown man, would I laugh at a guy snorting wasabi in Japan up his nose, then vomiting on the plate in front of the person? But still, I can't help but instinctually laugh because it's depraved and childlike, but yet it sort of like rekindles a little part of my childhood and makes me feel like a kid seeing these adults play this way. But Jeff, what was your experience with Jackass when it came out?
Well, I think it's important to mention too that really the influence that MTV had on changing all kinds of the pop culture. By this point, the music videos had almost started to take a back seat to a lot of the funny game shows that they did parodies of, and Beavis and Butthead and Jackass and things like that. That really, I think, expanded the profile beyond music, of course. And Jackass, it was kind of funny because I think one of the things that was really wonderful about it was that it was so daring because we've talked about comics and superheroes and on all those kind of things for the last 20, 30 years now. And going back to Batman with Michael Keaton in 80
89.
80 89, right? And then through Spider-Man and Marvel and everything else. But here's people who are really doing physical bodily harm that are almost superheroes in a way that they're putting their bodies into this. I mean, even the alligator nipple clinch there on Johnny Knoxville tile art is hilarious. I mean, just like, what are these guys doing? And it's dangerous. It's they could hurt themselves. They are hurting themselves. But it's again sort of, we can't look away. I also think that they started to not only parody a lot of our sort of can't look away culture, but there for years and years before you were even born, Mike, they used to say, if it bleeds, it leads on the news.
Mm-hmm.
And people watch the news, local news, more often than not, apparently, from research, because even if they had a bad day, they didn't have a fire, their house didn't break out in a fire, or they weren't robbed or something like that, like usually local news starts out with. So I think this was sort of making hay out of, the faces of evil, the nastiness on the news, the sort of burgeoning delight in true crime and finding out about, what's going on with all these celebrity murder cases, et cetera, et cetera. And here they kind of put their money where their mouth is, or their nipples were, or their asses were, by saying, you want outrageous television and you want to push the extremes, we'll push the extremes for you. Let us show you. And, it also was part and parcel, I think, of what Patty Chayefsky foresaw on network, where we were going to be pushing news to the edge and commentary to the edge with movies like Network, and shows that then followed suit like that, like Morton Downey Jr. or, dare I say, Bill O'Reilly and the O'Reilly Factor, and most of Fox News. I mean, I think all that outrageousness has become de rigueur more often than not these days, certainly on television, and even to some degree, how we push films to attention. But Jackass was one of the first ones that sort of boldly stood up and stood on the pedestal and said, "We're going to show you outrageousness, and it's going to be the genuine article. No flinching, no closing your eyes. Just watch, and if you choose to accept this mission, you'll have a hilarious time laughing at it all."
Yeah, I think we've gravitated more and more towards sensationalism
Hmm.
and short attention spans, and I think that's why Jackass isn't necessarily like I think it's a fun film to watch, but you shouldn't watch too much Jackass because then your brain will rot. But like Jackass was sort of like a product of that in your face, punk rock kind of time because it generated from this band called CKY, which was with Bam Margera and all these other guys, and they sent these tapes to MTV where they do like these skateboarding parts, which I always fast
Right.
forwarded through, and then they would have bits where someone would defecate on a window in front of people or do just something disgusting, and it feels like you shouldn't be watching it, but you can't. It's like a train wreck, but you can't help but see it. And I think that was kind of the fascination with it. It's like when they put it on television, you went, how are they getting away with putting this on TV? Because they were really pushing the envelope then. Because it's crass, it's tasteless, it's disgusting. It, I'm sure there are lots of parents out there at the time saying this is going to destroy our youths. And in the spirit of Beavis and Butthead, which quite a quaint show, really. It's not that crass. I mean, it's the movie that came out, Beavis and Butthead Do America, is rated PG-13. Meanwhile, the South Park film, that was a hard R, and now it's like nothing compared to some of the stuff they've done on the show. But yeah, we wanted to see things that bleed, and these are guys who are directly doing this. But yeah, Jackass created a cultural sensationism where all of a sudden people thought, hey, if these guys can make something dumb and get to the top, then maybe I can. And there was probably some infamous Jackass deaths and stuff like that from people who thought they could do the things, because they tell you again and again in the show this is done, with professional or by professionals or under the supervision of professionals. And of course, I'm wondering which guys are the professionals. Like, is like Johnny Knoxville's a professional? What's he a professional in? Uh,
Yeah. Well, to your
yeah,
point, I think you probably end up wanting to watch it and love it because of the fact that it influenced so much. I mean, not only did it influence, TikTok and YouTube and all these people doing sort of amateur stuff and trying to get attention, but America's Funniest Home Videos and people
yeah.
falling over, and there's always these montages on whether it's YouTube or TikTok or anywhere where you can find people, in the ice going out of their doors in the morning, and they slip on the pavement and they all fall over, and it's a series of montages, much like the kind of antics they did here. Now here they did it intentionally, knowing they're going to do it, but I mean, I think it's all this. We're laughing at people's injuries and mistakes and pain and some of that kind of stuff. But I dare say also, Mike, I think this sort of foreshadowed bro culture,
Yeah.
which the Joe Rogans and the Trump supporters and the MAGA crowd is definitely all kind of part of too. Is this, we're not going to follow the rules. We're going to be macho bros and talk to ourselves and, kind of cling to childhood or our teenage youth as much as possible. Maybe be slightly dismissive of people unlike us, or, women, et cetera, et cetera. But, not embracing the sort of maturity culture, instead clinging to the sort of immaturity that, you want to stay a kid all your life. And that's definitely evident in a lot of the podcasts today, where bros are sitting around talking about everything from snacks to women to, politics, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very landmark show in many respects. as a sort of accumulation movie. I think they did a number of them, which were some of the greatest hits from the show and such, and obviously some things shot just for the big screen as well. But it's a time capsule movie for certain because it captured a certain trend that was burgeoning at the time, and now it's so familiar you almost have to remind yourself, oh yeah, that's right. It goes back to stuff like Jackass and Beavis and Butthead and Morton Downey Jr. in the early days of Fox News and some of those kind of America's Funniest Home Videos where we're all laughing at other people and the extremes.
Yeah. Although I don't think Jackass quite created bro culture, although there is that bro atmosphere where they're, drinking beers together and doing stupid shit. But it's not quite where it's like they're
Well, they don't
promoting
have any
anything
women
that
doing it, and they throw
they
around midgets and things like that. I mean, it's
oh
all
yeah.
about like it's a lot of show your scrotum, put something up your ass, which is kind of
Yeah.
typical heterosexual males' fear of gayness, and all this kind of stuff between the lines. So I don't know about that, Mike. I think it's there. I think it's maybe not as evolved as bro culture has become today with it, affecting elections because men are resentful and white men feel that the world has passed them by and they don't want to share the pie or something. But I think there's a lot of a club here that is exclusive to guys who have a certain asshole attitude. I don't think it's
Right.
public allowed.
No, and I definitely hear that. I don't think that the movie though has that kind of mean spirit to it.
Right.
It has like a very like kind-heartedness,
Yeah,
like
there's a
they
sweetness to their stupidity
yeah.
and silliness, and they certainly pay for it with the pain and all that. So they're asking for it, but at the same time, you couldn't have the movie without the show, and I think the show trafficked in that.
Yeah, but I mean, it does. I mean, to your point, though, it did probably inadvertently kind of create this culture of people that wanted to not be educated. To
Right.
think to be dumb is actually to be good,
Right.
which is kind of like who, which kind of created the Trump cult today. But I don't think like Jackass is the thing that created it. It's just one of those things like monster trucks or the
Right.
WWE where
But
they
I mean, I
like
think it
watching
coaxed.
it.
I think it coaxed
Yeah.
it along. I mean, you could go back to my high school when Animal House came out, and that was, the geeks and the uh, sort of gross guys versus the establishment.
Yeah.
And that was a similar thing too. I mean, John Belushi's character of Bluto wasn't too far off of the modus operandi of Jackass.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
throwing mustard bottles and smashing guitars on his, in his path, or breaking beer bottles on his head. That's very Jackass. So I think it's always been a clinging to youth culture, to particularly, and I think MTV definitely trafficked in this, appealing to the teen boys who were probably mostly watching that. They weren't dating. They were watching Madonna strut around and pop a nipple out during Papa Don't Preach and freeze framing that because they weren't exactly going out and finding it themselves. And, it became this club then of like, hey, we're not uncool. We're actually very cool for doing this stuff. And then that translates into some of this kind of stuff. It's certainly in the Man Show that was a popular thing at the time with
Oh
Adam Carolla
yeah.
and Jimmy Kimmel. I think it was in the game shows that they did on MTV, the weird dating shows with Jenny McCarthy, or the trivia stuff in your basement, where in your Barca lounger, like you're just a dingaling at home on a Friday and Saturday night from high school, and
Yeah.
maybe you should be out, I don't know, participating in school activities or fun extracurricular things or dating. But I think what is wonderful about Jackass is it took all that stuff that maybe is a little bit more between the lines and sort of made it explicit. Like, we are guys who have nothing better to do than try to test whether we can, fart out a flame or whatever,
Yeah.
all the goofy stuff that you'd hear about at campfires and when you're in sixth grade and stuff. And here they are in their 20s and 30s doing it and showing that it's still funny and it's still ridiculous. And, some of that kind of humor still exists and transcends age even.
Yeah, I think it's also something that people enjoy watching because they're adults not acting like adults,
Right.
and it's kind of like a "fuck the system" sort of message, although they're not really saying that. They're just saying, "Be free to be whoever you wanna be and who you are.
Right.
If you wanna be a kid, be a kid." But the movie's not trying to say anything. I
Well,
again,
the other thing I
we're
think though
talking
that's
about Jackass.
but the other thing about the
Yeah.
show and Jackass is even though they have the warnings and they talk about supervision and all that kind of stuff. You know, nobody's really harmed badly here, at least by death or being maimed, you know. So
Yeah.
there's a certain amount, you know, we're going to go right up to that line where it seems like they really could be injuring themselves and they won't. They might bleed, they may, you know, get a ripped or wrenched muscle or a little bit of bleeding here and stuff, but it's not like, oh, they lost a limb or an eye or something like that, you know. So
Yeah.
there's a certain security in watching this, even though it's outrageous, that it's not going to go to the point where like Faces of Death or Snuff or things like that that had a reputation of, you know, challenging you to look at it, and there were real repercussions in what you're watching, including like, you know, I mean, I always say the world changed when the president was killed in public in '63,
Hmm.
and you know, Life magazine put the pictures of it in the most popular magazine in the planet at that time, and showed him getting killed. I mean, and then you know, years later, a decade later almost, it was shown as a film on the Geraldo Rivera special,
Hmm.
and from there on, I think, you know, anything goes. You know,
Yeah.
we were used to seeing everything. We wanted to see it. Some of it was because of our interest in the truth and true crime, and honestly, what was going on in Vietnam and with Watergate, and seeing the crimes and the truth exposed. But um, you know, Jackass is a manifestation of that, albeit a very funny one, and I think a lasting one, because fatty fall down, or somebody, you know, something explodes in somebody's face, or they fall in a pile of mud, is always funny, and that transcends culture. I mean, there's stories back in the 20s when they were doing some exploration in the Congo and the South American countries that were sort of tested or unexplored at that time, and they found native tribes there, and they would sometimes show them things of American culture to see if they responded to it,
Hmm.
and whether it was in, you know, the Andes or some of these places where you wouldn't have known sort of cinema. They showed Charlie Chaplin movies, and when Charlie Chaplin falls down or trips over something, everybody laughs. It's
Hmm.
universal. Somebody tripping, somebody embarrassing themselves, somebody having bodily, you know, screw ups is hilarious, and it doesn't take any education, any you know, sort of system that has it, you know, constantly in the eyes of the public. It's funny. Physical
Yeah.
humor is physical humor, and it's always been funny and always will be. And I think Jackass was the pushing it to the extremes, but it's very funny.
Yeah, it's just like farting. You know, everyone's like, "Oh, it's
There
low
you go.
class." It's like, yeah, it's low class, but it's humor from God. You know, it's a
Yeah.
funny sound
Dog
that comes
fart
out of
and
our
babies
body.
fart and everything else. It also
Yeah.
reminds me of that famous Simpsons episode where Homer was making the movie with the football in the groin, you
Yeah.
know, and he
George
says
C.
it
Scott.
works on so many levels. And Marge says, "No, it doesn't, homie. It only works on one level, but it's a great level."
Yeah, exactly. Instead of seeing the movie about his friend, expressing the you know, how he's dying through alcoholism, you know, he's like, "Barney's film is amazing, but football in the groin had a football in the groin."
Yeah,
And of course, at
exactly.
the Academy Awards, it wins Best Picture, I think.
Right. And George C.
And
Scott is
yeah.
an Academy Award winning
"Ah,
performance
my
getting it.
groin."
And it's so good because Barney's film is done almost like an Ingmar Bergman film. It's like, "Don't
Yeah,
feel sorry for me. I'm already dead." It's like, you know,
yeah.
this esoteric student film, black, strange imagery juxtaposed against other stuff. But Homer's got that visceral football to the groin. It's Johnny Knoxville somewhere smiling.
Yeah, exactly, and I think like, this movie is the cinematic equivalent to football in the groin. You know,
So
we
true.
should've like, we shoulda go out in droves and see it, but damn it, if you see Jackass alone, it's a little weird, you
Yeah, you
know?
have to see with at least a group of friends, and hopefully with a fairly crowded room, or back in the day when you'd see it with
Yeah,
a group of in the theater. That's where it really works.
yeah. Did you see it, like, in the
I
theater
did,
when it came out, or
I
oh,
did.
okay.
Back in those days, before my critic days, I was seeing kind of everything. I
Uh-huh.
mean, if a movie opened on the weekend, and they didn't open every weekend, but there weren't like three movies opening every weekend either. But chances are I saw it, and certainly I mean, I watched it when it was on television. And part of the reason I know I went to the theater is I wanted to see what they could get away with that they couldn't
Mhm.
get away with on TV. Because say what you will, but MTV got away with a lot, but it was still basic cable.
Mm.
And this movie, was pushing it farther, which they could in people choosing to go see it. And was it rated R? I think it was rated R. Was it
Oh
not?
yeah, it was rated R. They couldn't get away with an X. You
I mean,
can't.
and some of the
Yeah.
political incorrectness too, of course, was a little much that they would have, the FCC and other people would have been up in arms if with certain elements then. But yeah, it was very funny, and if you're still watching it, that's great because it's hey, you can go on TikTok, you can go on YouTube, you can go on any Sunday night at 6 o'clock on ABC and see the same kind of stuff, and it's always getting thousands and thousands of hits and doing well in the ratings. People love that stuff, and they do it now with pets. I mean, they've got
Oh yeah.
the whole thing of cats on TikTok, where cats are embarrassed cats or cats falling, or they're trying to open up a drawer to get food out, and they end up smashing a glass or pulling out the silverware drawer, whatever. And it's hilarious as hell. These things are always funny. Again, you show any of those TikToks to those same tribes in the Congo or whatever they did back in the 20s, and they laugh just as hard.
Yeah,
They
a
wouldn't
comedy.
even question, like, what is this? How did you film this? How is this edited? There's a score too. They don't think about that. It's just the visual. Is it funny or not? It
Yeah.
is, and it's cut to be funnier and scored to be even funnier, and so on and so forth. But we can say, well, how dare they? It was low class, but they said the same thing about Benny Hill and George Carlin and the 7 words you can't say on television, Cheech and Chong, Jerry Lewis, going back and Bud Abbott, Lou Costello. I mean, comedy is comedy, and it's always funny. Poor Adam Sandler, he's a great actor, and Steve Martin, a great actor, but they're and Jim Carrey, but they're more heralded for their dramas, when I think their real contributions are how brilliant they are as comic actors. There's very few people who can be that good as a comic character, and those three, let alone these guys in Jackass, are doing something that it's hard to be trained to do, and it's more instinct than anything, and it's funny as funny.
Yeah, and there a couple points where you were talking about that you reminded me of is one reason Jackass works so well, unlike most narrative comedies, where people are like, "Oh yeah, I don't think like hey, Jim Carrey, like some of the comedies, blah, I don't like it." Although, liar, liars, mwah. But you have to make an audience laugh for like 90 minutes straight. That's really hard to do in a movie, but Jackass like consistently does it with each film because the humiliation rituals, I guess you could say, of this movie is just endlessly creative and hilarious and daring. And now they're coming out with a Jackass 5,
Oh wow.
which yeah, I think
Well,
it's
it's funny, Mike. You
yeah,
you hit the nail on the head. Um, with comedy, you have to be funny right away, and you have to
yeah.
sustain it. And if you're not getting the laughs, the movie is dying. The show is dying. Drama. You want to be effective and enthralling, and getting people to want to watch and care. But at the same time, a slow build can lead oftentimes to a great conclusion, and something that only is really big at the very end. I remember seeing the movie The Accidental Tourist, and I think it was '92 or whatever it was, maybe, that was a very well done adaptation of the best-selling novel, and it was the string of William Hurt's Best Picture nominees. I think he was in 5 Best Picture nominees in 7 or 8 years, and it was very well done. But it's a very slow build. It's very subtle. It's very calm. There's not a lot of drama in it, and sort of at the end, when he realizes that he can't get back together with his wife, and that unfortunately their marriage has suffered from losing their child in that terrible shooting in the McDonald's. And he ends up with Gina Davis, and he stops the cab to get her. And suddenly the music swells, and John Williams does a great job with the score there. And she's like, "Oh, you came back for me." And William Hurt, finally, his sort of morose, downtrodden, gray character, finally opens up and smiles and laughs. And it's such a great moment, but it's building to that for 2 hours. You can do that in drama. You don't have that luxury in comedy. Comedy, you better have them laughing from the get-go. And that's why, it's great that Eddie Murphy just got the American Film Institute Life Achievement Award. What he did as a comedic actor and making his movies a must-see for at least a decade is incredibly significant in the history of film, and he should be lauded for that. He also, of course, opened the door for black artists, and other than Sidney Poitier, was probably the only black celebrity who could actually open a film
Yeah.
for many, many years. I mean, I'm not sure there's ever been anybody else who's a guaranteed box office success the way those two were when their name is above the title. But again, bravo to the AFI for honoring him as a comedic actor, and they don't honor comedies enough.
Yeah. And let's not forget that he also saved SNL when it was
That's
really
right. When it
tanking
was
in the
really,
80s.
it
Yeah.
was. That's right.
Yeah.
That was
That's
before your time, though, wasn't it, Mike?
yeah,
Yeah, because that
there's
was
one.
my time. I was in college, and it was like it went from must see television every Saturday night in '75 to probably '78 to like
Yeah.
what's going on? Can they? But Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo sort of riding his coattails. Those two were the only two who seemed to be talented. I think they're the only two that were rehired by Lauren Michaels after that one terrible season.
Well, that season also didn't work because when they replaced Michaels, they had this guy who,
Dick
like, just
Ebersol
yeah,
from
he
sports, I think,
basically.
wasn't
I'm sorry.
he? I think he was from the sports world, was he not?
Yeah, he was a sports guy, and he replaced all the comedians with actors.
Yeah,
And that's when it didn't work because
right,
comedians know funny like right away. And being a comedian, you're either naturally funny or you're kind of funny and you can build to being funny.
right.
But as someone who's worked in the stand-up world, it's like if you don't have it in any sort of way, you're
Hmm.
not going to make it. And some
Right.
people are just lucky, like Joe Rogan, who's not even funny. He just happened to be cast in some sitcom, and
Well,
then
and then his
yeah,
what was that game show he did?
Fear Factor.
Fear Factor. That's right.
Yeah,
I mean, that became a phenomenon. Again, a show that could not have been possible if it hadn't been for things like Jackass,
Jackass.
because
Yeah,
here we've got bull nuts that you're going to have to eat with
yeah.
mashed potatoes, and let's see if the girls will eat those nuts. Hardy har har har.
Well, if they're
That kind
cooked
of
right, they could be okay. But
yes,
yeah,
but that kind of stuff couldn't have made it on television if it wasn't for the success of a lot of the forefathers, including the Johnny Knoxvilles of the world.
yeah. And I think the first Jackass, like maybe it's my favorite one because of how impactful it was. And then like the other movies just try to be more gross. But I like the first one the best because it's not just gross out humor, it's more like a mixture of everything from pranks to other people to pranks to each other to gross out humor. And I think that's why like it mixed it all like the air horn in the golf course is one of the funniest things, and that's a clean joke.
Yep,
You can
sure, yeah,
show that to
that's
anyone.
right, that's right.
Yeah, like the cleaner stuff I thought was sometimes funnier than the dirty stuff.
Yeah, or
Um,
even like the clip of the alligator. It's a baby alligator, and you think, oh, he's got baby teeth and stuff, but it's like I wouldn't put a clothespin on my nipple,
yeah.
let alone something with teeth. And
And
that guy doesn't. You might think it's his mommy, and he's going to suck, I don't know, milk out of it. I don't know how alligators work, but it's like, are you nuts? You couldn't pay me enough to do that, and he's doing it on a dare.
yeah, and that part's kind of cute too, because he's like a little tiny baby alligator,
Yeah,
and
he's
I'm
almost
like, oh,
cute.
this is so cringy, but oh, he took a little bite. He's so hungry. When I'm watching it.
Oh, that's funny, Mike.
Yeah,
That's funny. I
but
like your commentary. You should do the commentary on the 4K
well,
they'll eventually do.
the commentary on the DVD is great, and I still own the physical
Oh, do
DVD
you? Oh,
for it, and
okay.
that's how
That's
I didn't
great.
have to give Paramount my money. Um,
Not
so
anymore.
exactly. That's why you keep your DVDs, folks, and it's got all the extra stunts and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I've always loved this movie because it mixes like all these like pranks with disgusting stuff, and I feel like the second one was a little too reliant on the disgusting stuff. Although I will give it credit, the final sketch of that movie was a big prank where they like put their pubes on a guy's face
Yeah,
and
Jesus.
made him look like a terrorist, and they basically like made him think that he was going to get abducted into a car because it was like a prank on a prank where he was going to pretend like he was going to bomb an airport, and then the cab driver like catches on to it, but he doesn't know that he's really not a terrorist, and it was funny as hell. But the first one is always going to be special to me, from the fireworks waking up to the air horns to the pea snow cone. the fireworks out of the assholes are great. I
Right.
mean, Steve-O was funniest when he was on drugs. Not so funny when he's off of them. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think the only thing that really mars in some respects the Jackass today is I think culture wise we've gotten to a point where it's there's a lot of politically incorrect stuff with even the shavings, the pubic hair to make him look like
Yeah.
he's a terrorist, and of course, what does that mean? Uh, and let alone stuff with dwarfism and some of those kind of things where they're making fun of people for their their situation. Those kind of things generally don't play much today, and people don't even dare do them. But this is a different time, and kind of anything goes. And you could get away with a lot of things. And Woody Allen was one of our top filmmakers in the time. So, and Harvey
Oh,
Weinstein was probably the biggest mogul in the whole damn town. So,
yeah.
the things have changed and probably mostly for the better. But that's the one thing I think is mars this stuff when you watch a little bit is, to your point, the clean stuff is good. They could have done more of that. Instead, they're doing Arab jokes. They're doing dwarf jokes. It's like, even
Well,
then, I remember that was kind of cringy because it's just like, is that really where you have to go? But anything goes, and that was their whole modus operandi.
yeah.
But for me, I would rather see somebody stick a firecracker in their butt, thinking that it's not going to hurt their anus, just because you don't want to shoot and hurt your pooper. But seeing them dwarf toss or throw little guys around or do things that are basically racist jokes, they shouldn't have been done then either. But they were, and it was all part and parcel.
You're right. I don't quite remember the racist jokes in it, but I mean there was the dwarf stuff, but Wee Man was in on it. And you
Yes.
remember that it wasn't homophobic. They had John Walters or
Well,
John
of course,
Waters in
right. But I mean,
the
at the same
second
time,
one.
it's the panic factor of the audience.
Yeah.
That like teenage boys. Heaven forfend they should maybe back in those days you would ask somebody, well, do you think Robert Redford or Paul Newman is attractive? Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know. That's what I'm not supposed to know. It's like, well,
Yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
can say that whether you're straight or gay or not. Uh, we have beauty standards, and it doesn't change because you don't want to maybe admit that you find men attractive or can at least recognize a man as being attractive. But that was part of the unfortunate brownness of it too that I think still exists today in a way. I
Yeah.
mean, it's why we won't vote a woman for president, even
I
if she's
know.
more qualified than the
It's so
entire slate
sad.
else running against her.
Yeah, it's sad. Although I always felt like Jackass kind of had like a very it was bro, but it felt very kind of like pro gay. Pro
In some
like
respects, I mean, I think it it
yeah.
it it eats its cake and has it too in a way,
Okay.
because it can be appealing on both sides. And the racism is like making him look like a terrorist. What does a terrorist look like? An Arab.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, that's what the cliche was in those days. So that's what they did. He's going to get in trouble for looking that way. Um, Again, those things don't age so well. They didn't really age. They weren't very well then either. But we
Yeah.
somehow had a society that was more forgiving of that more than so
Yeah.
today. But there is the funniest funny parts of the physical humor that will always stand the test of time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Jackass to me is a classic, which is weird to say. Like I don't think any of us would have said that. I know it prided itself on negative reviews when it came out, but even when it came out, like the reviews weren't like universally like this movie's terrible. They were kind of mixed.
Well,
And then
and
they
the what was
slowly
the
got
grandpa
better.
one that they did, where
Oh
John
yeah,
Knoxville dressed up like a
I saw
well,
it
it
once
got an
on a
Oscar
DVD.
nomination for makeup. Enough people in the Academy saw
Yeah.
it. It was nominated for makeup that year because the entire movie had to convince you that he was this 80-year-old man, and it was Johnny Knoxville in really good makeup, acting like a blithering, idiotic old timer, which again is politically incorrect. But there you go.
Yeah.
A lot of humor tends to be that way, and that's fine. Um, but anyway, so well,
I
shall we
think
move on to
yeah, I was about to
I mean,
say,
we've spent 4 minutes on Jackass, which is a very funny movie, but that's a
I
lot of
will
time. More
I
than
will
Johnny
host
Knoxville's
a
been talked about
5-hour
anywhere.
podcast on Jackass.
Oh, that's so
But I
funny.
guess if you were to give Jackass your Guinness rating, what would you give it?
I would give it 3 out of 4.
Okay, 3 out of 4. That's actually I'm gonna go a little further. I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 4
Okay,
because a 4 out of 4, that's like reserved for movies that are great. But
sure,
I
sure.
will say, like, if a movie makes me laugh this hard, this consistently, this many times that I see it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine, and you know
Sure, of
what?
course.
If they're still making Jackass movies and they have a new Jackass crew, which now does have some woman on there,
Well, that's good.
yeah, then you know, go ahead and Jackass away. But yeah, I don't.
There you go.
But I did have this image in my head. Moving on to the next film, where what if when the first men who landed on the moon, if Buzz Aldrin ran up to Armstrong, I can't remember his first name,
Neil
Lance
Armstrong.
Armstrong,
No,
yeah,
Neil
Neil
Armstrong.
Armstrong, yeah, Lance
Lance
Armstrong.
Armstrong's the biker.
He's the single ball guy,
The
yeah,
Jesus.
but yeah.
Yes,
But I did have this image when I was driving of, okay, this is a very
bike racer.
serious, important, groundbreaking moment. But what if one of them punched the other guy in the balls? And then it was,
I think we're now blending Jackass and
yeah,
Capricorn One.
exactly. I was thinking, what if
Capricorn
Jackass,
Jackass. There's a new
eh,
sequel. There you go.
Capricorn Jackass, yeah, like
Craziness where you'd least expect it, including on the
OJ
moon.
Simpson like falls out of the
On
car when they're
Mars.
doing the chase, and another
Yes,
car
yes.
runs them over.
Well, see, that's
But
what's interesting about this movie to start off with is this is when O.J. Simpson was considered a movie star. He had come off as
yeah,
starring in the Towering Inferno, and he was doing other things. I think he was in a couple of the Cassandra Crossing, maybe, or some those kind of B adventures that were in the big screen. And here he's one of the astronauts asked
yeah,
to fake the Mars landing to keep NASA going. And it was coming off of course, lots of conspiracies that had taken up a lot of space in the brain for most of America for a decade, with the Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, Vietnam, Watergate. Seems everywhere you were turning, there was some sort of scandal or somebody who was doing something illegal in the government and getting arrested for it or called out for it. And this kind of rode that to sort of the paranoia kind of cinema that was also becoming famous at the time, whether it was the Parallax View or 3 Days of the Condor, all the way up to things like, Executive Action and Winter Kills, as well as this movie, which was kind of remarkable in the sense that it was fairly well received, and it was very well done by and large. But I don't know if it holds up, and that's why I picked it. It's still a movie I love, and when I come across it, I will watch it and I'll return to it. But there's things I can critique about it now that when I was a teenager and this came out, I was pretty obsessed with, because it seemed very clever, and it's all about the stuff that is in the news and everything else. And maybe this was done. And of course, there's always been rumors that the moon landing stuff was fake. And anytime you open up a can of Stanley Kubrick,
yeah,
there's somebody who's saying, like, well, he was the one who shot all that stuff. That's why he did it, because he did 2001 and he was able to make it look real. And why doesn't that flag move? And there's no stars in the sky. I mean, 100 things that they question about the NASA things. My one question always about the NASA thing was like, how did they get the perfectly clear phone calls from the NASA module to the president, Nixon, back in the day when, I remember back in the day, I'd call somebody who was in another state and I could barely hear them, but, maybe they had state-of-the-art
I would say they'd have better phones
phones
at
for the
NASA.
government
Yeah.
than you and I had when we were kids.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Capricorn One is one of those films that is, it's a very clever idea, and I think it's very well done. It's well acted by and large. It's certainly exciting, but it also has some fun to it that I think I appreciate now more, where you see a little bit of the cheek to it. I would argue that the failure of the movie, from where I sit as a critic, let alone as a fan who's now watching it these later years, is in the Elliot Gould storyline. As great of an actor as he is, and he's the lead in it, and he's very good playing Woodward and Bernstein wannabe. There's too many things that happen to him, and too many coincidences that I think hurt the rest of the film. I mean, he goes to the place where they were holed up and he finds the medallion, or he goes to the right place where they were sort of marveling at the Western film shootout kind of stuff, and somebody takes a shot at him, but nobody bothers to believe him, even though his car is driven off the road with fake brakes and he's shot at. And all these other things. His friend disappears, and this woman appears in this apartment, and pretends like she's been there forever and a day. When that would be an easy enough thing for a good reporter, if he was really a good reporter, or certainly the cops to take an interest in, especially in the era of paranoia and the government overreach that we were in, that they could have found from the landlord that he was paid off, or a neighbor remembered the old person who worked for NASA who lived there, et cetera, et cetera. But having said that, what I think makes the movie terrific, really terrific, and still why I watch it, I dare say, Mike, is two things. One is I think it's pretty cool and kind of awful in its way, both cool and awful, that they put these, heralded astronauts out in the desert to crawl through, try to, survive, and they're drinking water where they can and going thirsty and eating raw snakes. And to me, the best scene in the movie is where Sam Waterston, this is before Sam Waterston became sort of known by everybody from Law and Order and the movies and television shows he was in. I think he'd only done really The Great Gatsby before that in '74 when he played Nick Carraway and was terrific in it. But when he's climbing that sheer side of the cliff, trying to get to the top,
he really sells it.
And he sells that in that joke about, so, that's how you break bad news to somebody. So how's mom? She's on the roof. And then he gets up there, and of course he's on the roof of the mountain. And those mother effing choppers are just sitting there waiting for him. And the other thing that I think makes it a great film in its way, at least in parts, is that Jerry Goldsmith score, because it's big, it's bombastic, but it's also cheeky, because he knows that this is kind of, silliness and a lot of, kind of pulp. And so, as soon as that score starts, it's bum, 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 and, gongs and bells and dun, dun, But what I love about it is, okay, it starts out with this very bombastic, I think it's a 9/6 time. It's a very strange measure. But it was one of his more heralded scores. But what I love about it is soon that bum, 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 bum becomes the theme, almost like the shark in Jaws of the evil conspiracy. Like every time, like when he goes in, the magazines have this woman's name on it, like she's been there forever, and it's bum, 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 bum. Or like when, James Brolin finally gets a break and is able to get a drink in that crusty old gas station out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and you see him standing there, and then the helicopters enter the frame, and you see them coming closer from that window, and there's Jerry Goldsmith score, bum, 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 bum. I mean, it becomes fun. And as terrible as it is, they might be killed. He's hanging off that biplane, and the choppers are after him. There's a cheek to it, and it keeps it rollicking and fun. So, they take themselves seriously in the sense that they get good actors and have a clever script, but they don't take themselves too seriously, even though, certainly the government was definitely guilty of plenty of kind of shenanigans.
Yeah, well,
what did you think of it? Because you saw it for the first time.
Yeah, I was about to say, I saw it for the first time.
Thanks, Jeff. You wasted 2 hours of my life. Go ahead.
No. This is your guilty pleasure movie. I want you to explain why you like it.
Sure.
So, rants away. This is a safe space.
What did you think of it, Mister?
When I watched it yesterday, I thought the first 20 minutes were really great. Like I was really getting into the plot because because the whole plot of the movie, and actually I will put up spoilers for this one because I don't think a lot of people have seen it. So they reveal in the movie that they ran the test simulation. And they found out that if these guys try to go to Mars, they'll die. Right. So what they're going to do is have them go inside of a TV studio, pretend like they're on the surface, and then go inside of like a little pod, like a fake pod, and say their final goodbyes to their wives. I'm like, this is really cool because like I'm not a flat earther, I'm not a fake moonland guy, but the idea stemmed from the writer and director of the film,
Peter Hyams.
Peter Hyams, because he began to think about a film about a space hoax while working on broadcasts of the Apollo program missions for CBS. And then he later elaborated in a 2014 interview that whenever there was something on the news about a space flight, they would cut to the studio in St. Louis where there was a simulation of what was going on. I grew up in the generation where my parents basically believed if it was in the newspaper, it was true. That turned out to be bullshit. My generation was brought up to believe that television was true. That was bullshit too. So I was watching simulations and I was wondering what would happen if someone faked the whole story. Kind of reminds me of Wag the Dog before Wag the
Very
Dog
much
came out.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, where
Well, oh, go ahead, please.
oh no, where the government they're making up a story to win approval, and they could have just told the public, "Sorry, the space mission isn't going to work out." But this is during the time when we had the whole space race, and of course, this movie came out after the moon landing, um,
But at the
and
time, like people were questioning whether they should be spending money on NASA when
yeah,
there was, problems with the inner city and infrastructure was waning and kids were going hungry and there was healthcare issues, et cetera, et cetera. All the same stuff we still have today. But there was, today we talk often about why do we keep feeding the war machine, and especially when we find the billions for Iran, but we can't, keep USAID or Head Start or some of those kind of things going. But this is a very topical, timely, issue at the time. So good for Peter Hyams for, I think, making it all the more, dare I say, reasonable, because
yeah,
he was playing off of those very issues that were in the discussion.
yeah, and those issues still uh, are around today. There's conspiracies about it. You got people who think 9/11 was a conspiracy.
Right.
People, the only conspiracy that I could possibly conjure that might be true is JFK's assassination.
Well, and
Yeah,
that one, I think, the American people figured that one out in '64 when the Warren Commission came out.
yeah,
They hook, line, and sinker, like 70% of America said, no, I don't think this is right. There's too many unanswered questions, too many things that they were making assumptions on. Just so many things that just unravel that. And I still think to this day, you could look at RFK thing too, where there's so many bullets, and Saran was in front of RFK, and yet he was shot in the back of the head. Where did that gun come from, et cetera, et
mhm,
cetera. But one of the things I dare say I like about this, and maybe you and I as film critics, like let alone fans of movies, can appreciate, is Peter Hyams was very good about a lot of this. Like, for example, I think, to your point about the first 20 minutes, I think the highlight of this movie, other than Sam Waterston climbing up that hill or that mountain,
yeah,
was Hal Holbrook's monologue about why they had to do this.
yeah,
When he talked about, like, we were so proud, and and then a few years later they were mad that we were preempting reruns of I Love Lucy. If it was an original I Love Lucy, I'd understand, but a goddamn rerun. And and it's a great monologue, and Hal Holbrook was so good.
yeah.
He's half corporate Lech, half corporate, Jimmy Stewart, and yet he's doing that because he's trying to convince these people that they have to do this for the greater good of keeping space exploration going. The dream stays alive. And yet I also love it towards the end, when he's getting the news, about the latest one who's been caught, and he's like, Brubaker is going west.
Mm, yeah,
Well, Forrest is going west. It's
yeah.
just so brutal and cold. And this is his friend, but it's stuff like that is very well done, very well directed. He cast it with, by and large, good actors. Even Telly Savalas, who's kind of miscast in it, is very funny. He doesn't seem
Yeah.
anything like Kojak. And Kojak was like one of the big shows that was kind of a coup. He got special billing in this. But he's hilarious. Like, keep your goddamn head down. They got guns, Sonny. It's so funny that he's just this. Like, and which one do you think I am? Wrong. I'm both.
Yeah.
Snotty. They're so funny.
Uh,
There's wit like that. There's good characters that come in for 5 minutes. It's very well done by and large.
I thought the movie was more of a mixed bag because after the first 20 minutes, it kind of meandered a bit. I think where the movie really lost me was the whole point of this thing was that they knew these guys are going to die, but to keep a good public image, they had to fake,
Right.
a landing. But then
Right.
at a certain point, when the spacecraft is re-entering the Earth's surface, like the safety hatch blows open, so everyone knows they would die. So then they say, "Oh no, now we got to tell the public we're gonna die, that they're dead." And I'm like, "Well, doesn't that negate the whole point that
Yeah,
you
it's
were
a
trying to
little bit of
show
a
that?"
question,
Yeah,
isn't it? Because it's like, well, so you didn't do the job right, and then maybe that doesn't keep it alive. But I mean, I guess you get the martyrdom, the heroism, all that kind of stuff up front.
yeah,
I agree with you. I mean, I think in some respects for Hyams, every two steps he does that are significant, good casting, good writing, good clever stuff, he maybe takes a step back. I think we've talked about a number of them. I mean, I also think that, like O.J. Simpson, he's not a good enough actor to hold his own. And Josh James Brolin was a big actor then, and
yeah.
he's good. He's stoic in it. He's kind of fine in this. He
You
was
just
certainly good
in
at
it,
Mark.
kind of.
But
Yeah,
Wanamaker, I mean, Sam Waterston and
yeah.
Hal Holbrook and Elliot Gould, they're better actors. And they get the better scenes. I mean, even David Doyle, who was doing this as a break from Charlie's Angels, is very funny. Bosley, and he's like, not Scoop Caulfield. Oh no. Oh, you're fired. Oh, I love saying that. I'm going to say it again. You're fired. I mean, those little bits really play. But there's other stuff that isn't as good. And I think unfortunately most of it is the Elliot Gould storyline. I also have to
Yes.
say, Jerry Goldsmith, we've talked a little bit about him. He's my favorite composer because I think more often than not, he gets not only what the movie's about, like Poltergeist isn't such a scary score. It's more about a family. It's kind of gentle
Mhm.
because, Carol Ann is such a big part of it. Almost sounds childlike, which is wonderful. The Omen is, this sort of religious fervor around Satan. So he takes all these kind of choir songs
Kratos,
and turns them into
Kratos.
the Alva Centauri stuff, which is kind of cheeky. And he has a
Yeah,
sense of humor about some of this stuff. Here he's got, like I said, not only the humor where like this big theme, but it also like, it's sort of bass theme is the villain theme in it, but also that ending. And yes, we are spoilers. You've been warned. But I mean, the fact that they would just drive into the funeral on national television with the sports car, getting past all the security and everything else, and nobody stops and goes, "Wait a minute, we've got to take you to the hospital, Mr. Brubaker." And then they run and it's in slow motion. But God bless America, Jerry Goldsmith's score
Mhm.
sells that. And
Mhm.
like when they're all looking, and finally, Brenda Vaccaro looks and she goes, like she can't believe it, and da na 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 na
Mhm.
na 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 is this big heroic moment, and then at the end when it's the two of them in slow motion, it's like doing frame by frame, and you get this going
yeah,
up the piano keyboard. I mean, it's just Jerry Goldsmith says, I'm going to save this by making it seem intentional.
yeah.
And
He's
it's
properly
it's
Mickey Mousing it.
exactly
Yeah,
it's defying credibility. So he's going to say, I'm going to lay it on extra thick with my highlighter known as brass and the piano. But
yeah.
it plays really well. It had audiences on their feet when I saw it in high school. People
Oh
were like cheering
wow.
at a football game. Like, I mean, it was kind of a big deal, like this was kind of that film. Now, most of it was a younger audience, I dare say, and so maybe they weren't as sophisticated. But it really played. And you know, I have to hand it to Goldsmith. He's done plenty of dramatic scores, plenty of subtle scores, but occasionally, like with Gremlins and like this and some of the others, he knows how to goose it just a little bit to say, yes, we're the actors are treating it serious, but we know this is a little bit of hokum.
Yeah. Well, I like bombastic scores in movies. I like big scores when they work right, and most of the time they do, because even if a movie doesn't work, you'll remember the music, and the music drives you. Like, imagine if you watched E.T., like the ending without the music. It would be just you'd be laughing. It
Well,
would
yeah, I
just
mean, and that score just elevates everything. I mean, you're soaring with those kids on the bikes and with E.T.
elevates
up
Elliot.
at the end. Exactly. The other thing I'll say about Jerry Goldsmith that's kind of funny, and I dare say, if you don't mind me just taking another minute to talk
Go
about
for
his
it.
work, is I think it's important the context that he puts his music in. A lot of it plays very much in concert, and his
Yeah.
best of kind of albums and things you can find on Spotify or your local music stores, but his music very is much of the film, and I'm going to give you two quick examples of it. Quentin Tarantino's a big Goldsmith fan, and he's used his music in a couple instances, including Django Unchained,
Yeah.
where they're going up to Candyland, and it's the music from Under Fire. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, the Nick Nolte and Gene Hackman. It was about the rebels in Nicaragua, and it's done with this sort of wood flute that is sort of a local instrument, and it builds. But in the movie, it never builds beyond this sort of doot, 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 until finally at the end when they're realizing they're going to help the Nicaraguans by actually going along with this thing to help create this fake photograph that's going to turn the tide. And then it sort of becomes, sort of bigger and more like a march. Now, when Tarantino does that in Django Unchained, it's a great piece of music and it's this long sort of march up to this heralded place, but it doesn't really work because the context is missing and you kind of need the movie for it. The other one I'll just tell you real quick, and I don't know if you ever watched Barnaby Jones when it was on, but Jerry Goldsmith did some TV theme songs, Room 222, Dr. Kildare, The Waltons, all kinds of different songs. Did a bunch of stuff for television, including he's won Emmys for like Star Trek and Masada and different things like that. QB7, maybe one of his best scores from the Leon Uris novel about the Holocaust and a trial that came out of it. Anyway, Barnaby Jones, in context, it's has that same cheek to it because it starts out with this ba-dum 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 bum bum ba-dum bum ba-bum ba-bum ba-bum, like it's a nasty world and there's villains out there and criminals, and this is a Quinn Martin production, and then comes in the melody and it's played by a flute. It goes do 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 do, kind of a counter to that, and that's Barnaby Jones. He's this septuagenarian, this old man that nobody thinks is going to be seriously taking on crime and figuring this stuff out, and he's well past his shelf date, and that's the bit. That's the cheek in the instrumentation that he puts in there, just like he did, as I mentioned, in Under Fire. When you hear it in concert now, or even on Jerry Goldsmith's Greatest Hits album, they change the orchestration. It's more for the symphonic of it, but within context of the actual show, that flute is very important. And that speaks, I think, to the genius of Goldsmith, that he has a sense of the thing to let the music not only comment on it, but do it in context where, of course, it's a flute, because that's a softer instrument, just like this old, softer man that's going to walk into this terrible situation and show the criminals who's boss.
Yeah. I will say that in terms of guilty pleasure movies, I don't think Capricorn 1 is quite a guilty one like
Yeah,
Jackass.
it's not terrible. I mean, a lot of people hate it. I'll say I love that movie, it's watching and all this kind of stuff. And we go, really? Capricorn 1? I know it's got its flaws, but yeah, it's a little bit elevated, but
it does. I will
it's not
say,
quite as bad. But then again, Jackass is very well done too. I didn't want to pick Roadhouse. Let me put it that way, Mike. It was between Capricorn 1 and Roadhouse. And I thought, I can't justify talking about Roadhouse for a half hour, the original with Patrick Swayze, with my friend Mike, but I can justify Capricorn 1 and another conspiracy theory guy, and the government is bad eggs. So I thought, this will be one that Mike will maybe enjoy.
It's a very interesting concept that I think, like, it in the beginning, like, they're doing a good job pulling it off. But then at a certain point, they kind of like negate like their own premise.
Right.
And that's when it falls apart. And like you were saying with Elliot Gould's character, they could have, like, he's a very good actor, but his character could have been cut completely and it would have helped the movie a lot. It could have been about the NASA guys and then the astronauts trying to survive the NASA guys.
I think it's a fair point. I mean, in some respects, he's not needed that much, other than, maybe Hyams didn't know a way to get Brubaker out of that gas station without a top dusting pilot and Elliot Gould into tow. You're right about that. I also think that, the movie feels like at some point when it was being rewritten, the studio or maybe the powers that be said, we need an action scene here. So, of course, they're escaping in the little jet, but they can't get the hatch up. So, it's right at the last second they get up. That kind of stuff, I think, cheapens the material some, because it's taking a smart intellectual concept about why you're having to fake a moon landing and turning it into sort of just pulpy action. But I think that's the maybe the reason that I shouldn't love this movie. To uh, your theme tonight is that that pulpy stuff I think hurts the better film that it could have been if it stayed with more of the intelligent stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same problem I have with The Matrix in a way. Like I
Mm.
thought like the beginning 40, 50 minutes are incredible. And I even like the action. But yeah, like but once they have to save Morpheus and they have the shootout, like yeah, those scenes are amazing. They're iconic. I love them. But I feel like it dumbed the movie down. And I
Right,
feel like this movie kind
too
of
much action.
dumbs yeah,
Yeah,
it dumbs itself down. Like, you have the scene where Elliot Gould, they cut the brakes in his car, and
yep.
it's a very well executed uh chase scene. But I don't really see
And
how
he
it
survives
benefits
it,
the
which is kind
story.
of crazy. Like I don't know if you'd survive going into the drink
Yeah,
head
he
first
just
with
gets
that
out of the
momentum.
car.
Yeah, and then just he's lives to fight another day, and nobody questions it. Nobody's asking about it. David Doyle is his editor, doesn't say what the heck happened. He makes a joke about it later. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I think some of those hurt it. There's been talk for decades about them remaking this now because I think if anything, we've become more
Mm,
trusting of our government. And if they did, I think it would behoove them to genuinely rewrite this film.
yeah.
Not just do it as, oh, we'll update it with better, special effects and
They can make it a straight comedy, which would be a
well, they
problem. Like,
could, or they could,
yeah,
look at like what, like, if you're really looking at sort of the Hal Holbrook monologue, what
yeah,
if that is, part of this? And like Three Days of the Condor, which also has some heft to it and some fun, but it's much more disciplined. It's a
yeah,
much more disciplined. There's only a couple of action sequences in it, and they're very short and sweet, and they're not there just because somebody at the studio said we need action, we need Redford to fight here every 10 minutes or something. So perhaps Capricorn One could do with a remake that would lean into the intellectual part of it more than the pulp part.
yeah. You'd have to be very careful because I think this movie got intellectual. It got dumb, a little bit. There were pacing issues. There were kind of tonal issues where
Yes.
it didn't know if it wanted to be like a parody of sort of the paranoid state that
Yep.
people lived in, where they couldn't believe anything that was being fed to them because a lot of it turned out not to be true, or if it wanted to be a serious thriller.
Right. And it
You know,
seems like they're almost attempting to make a little bit of a love interest
mm,
between uh, the reporter and Brenda Vaccaro as the we think widow. There's a couple of scenes where they're almost flirty with each other, which seems inappropriate. Like, and then Karen Black is his friend who, of course, he had to sleep with. Which, again, it's like having to put that backstory in about a reporter who shouldn't be as verbose or as distracted as he should, as really the material would warrant. I think is another sort of weakness of the film. Again, there's a lot of flaws in it, but it's still fun to watch.
it's still
Even
very entertaining, and
yeah,
I love the concept, and I think yeah, if you could remake this where it gets the tone right, where I think it's
hmm
like you have to figure out, do we want to go straight serious or do we want to go Doctor Strange love?
yeah.
Like how do you go in, or how do you find something that's in between? Because
Well,
I
like for
would hate it.
example, oh, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I
Well,
would
like
just
for
hate
example,
it
the
if it
Parallax View.
was
Have you seen the Parallax View?
which one?
The Parallax View with Warren Beatty.
No,
Well, he's a
no.
reporter then covering like a RFK assassination type,
Uh-huh.
and there's very little dialogue in it. It's just serious, and
Oh,
he's trying to figure it out by what he can find, as opposed to him having to be Mr. Charm and roguish and all that kind of bullshit that you'd
yeah.
almost expect Beatty to do. But here, they're trying to make more of the Elliot Gould character, and he almost becomes a comedian in a serious film.
Yeah, I think if you really did do a remake, I'm just worried the studios would be like, "Oh, let's make it a comedy," because we all know that people would think the moon landing was fake or kind of goofy. So like I could just imagine Seth Rogen like in this station, like, "Hey, am I on the moon?" Like we don't want that. Then
Yeah. See, I think they could do it with, again, maybe the idea of Capricorn One without it necessarily being even a moon landing. Is
Yeah.
it something that the government has created with the cooperation of these people who are coerced into doing it? Otherwise, their families will be killed for the greater good of saving some budget of segment of the budget or something. I don't know, but I mean, if I was doing a remake of it, I would treat it much more cold and
Mm,
tough.
mm,
I think the cheek of some of those movies back then, like there's a cheek to the taking of Pelham 123, which sometimes makes that play like a comedy, but that's the New York character, the
mm.
city of New York, and the characters who work in New York that added to that and made it seem very real. And yet it's still serious. The drama and the hostage crisis on the subway car is never treated as a joke. It's only some of the political machinations around it that are jokey. But to your point, I think if you're going to remake this, it would be smarter to just treat it intellectual and not be so cheesy and sort of goofy in some places.
Well, I would kind of go with a strange love route where
Oh, really? So you'd go the straight comedy, more farce route, really?
it would be a comedy, but why Strange Love works is because it's like intellectual comedy.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, you can't fight, and here
This is
this
the
is a
war
war
room.
room, like stuff like that. That's smart. So you'd want to I would want it
Mhm.
to be like this is my version of Doctor Strangelove, and ironically, maybe you would have a Stanley Kubrick like guy in there directing the Mars landing
Yeah,
on the set
yeah.
in the movie. But yeah, I mean, it's sad that human civilization and our
But see,
governments they don't fund NASA as much. I mean, I know Artemis 1 is this big deal, but I'm like, well, we landed in the moon in the 60s. Shouldn't we be doing a lot more of that? And they're like, well, they're gonna colonize it. Like, yeah, with
no,
how
they're
many
not. I mean,
people?
that's the other thing
Yeah.
that's bullshit. Like even Elon Musk with the whole Mars stuff, it's like we haven't done anything really expansive in the last 50 years. I mean, we're the
Yeah.
Jetson cars. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't even get an electrical vehicle off the ground substantially for the majority of the globe. It's like it's ridiculous. But see, I think it's an interesting commentary, Mike, that in your generation you'd want to go straight up comedy on this because to you this is silliness.
Yeah.
Like there is almost no seriousness in such a thing where it's true. I mean, I think this is part of the reason we tolerate a lot of the shenanigans that are going on day to day in news is it's all become farce. It's all become we're above it by laughing at it. Not saying that you're acting above it or anything, but the norms have been broken should not be laughed at or just accepted as well. That's how it is under this administration or this
Yeah.
day and age. And I think we default to comedy because it beats crying. But honestly, with what's going on in the world and some of these kind of things, it's very dramatic and it's maybe worth more tears than we're giving it.
Yeah, perhaps so. I feel like if you were to do a movie about this, I think the idea because now I could buy it, with what's going on. But I kind of like a movie like Art of Capricorn One. Um, I would go more of a farce route. But if you were to make like a movie about Trump, everyone's like, "Oh, make it funny, make it funny." I'm like, no, no, no. I would make it like a weird odyssey. It would just be a look into a deranged, damaged mind that was molded that way. Although I will say that The Apprentice did a pretty good
I think it was a
job.
very good job,
Yeah.
well done. And in some respects, by going back to the early part of his life to explain the rest of his life, I think bios like that often work,
Yeah.
where they don't try to do cradle to grave and tell too much story. But this is good. This is a good discussion. Well, we'll see, Mike. If
Yeah.
somebody does it, we'll see if they make it more of a humor. I mean, a lot of times topical stuff like this goes the straight route, like Don't Look Up, and
Yeah.
some of the things, Wag the Dog, to your point earlier, are done as dark comedies. So that might be the route to go here. But it'd be interesting to see if they could do a 3 Days of the Condor version of this, where it's treated seriously and still exciting, but not
Yeah.
too pulpy. I don't know.
Yeah. I'd say with this movie, I almost liked it. But I'm sorry.
I don't
It almost got there,
think there's a
but
theory on the conclusion here for you, Mike.
But yeah, it was a 2.5, or is
Okay.
that damn it,
Well,
is
that's
that the
okay.
wrong one? I gotta click the right one. Damn buttons. There it is. It's a 2.5 out of 4 for me. But
I
I
think
do say it's an enjoyable 2.5.
I mean, I think if I was looking at it just as a critic, I would probably say 2.5 out of 4. But as somebody who had affection for it in high school
Yeah.
and has sort of lived with this and watched it and examined it and thought about it and talked about it all these decades, I'd have to at least give it a 3 because I
Okay.
think what they do well is very well done. And you don't see many movies like this anymore. So it makes it all the more worth a look, I think. So to get people to maybe give it a chance, I'll say 3 out of 4, just to
Yeah.
be a little bit of the contrarian.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. If you like Jeff's stuff, you can go in the little thing that says see more and it links to all of his stuff. But he makes some amazing drawings. I'm going to have Jeff draw me one time, Titanic style, and it'll be a lot of fun.
I should draw you, Mike. You'd make a great caricature.
Only wearing the necklace. But yeah. But
Draw
Jeff,
me
thanks.
like one of your French girls, Jack.
Exactly. Oh man, that's a lot of. Oh, I was gonna make a joke, but someone's gonna like get like you know how people are.
Sure,
They have
sure.
tight buttholes that you need to put fireworks in. But thanks so much for coming on. If you liked what you saw, listen to all that stuff, you can check out this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts and wherever you watch your stuff. YouTube, TikTok. I don't use Instagram as much, but maybe I'll put a little more on there. Check it out all out at ypareviews.com. YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree. Thanks so much, guys, and have an awesome week. And don't I really wish I put with guilty pleasure. I wish I put little gavels above OJ's head. Have a good one, folks.